I think that one of the worst things that happens to people is when they wake up, but their spouse is still fast asleep. When one partner in a marriage wakes up, a lot of times there's kids involved as well. What do you do? What do you do when you wake up and the person that you love is not even close to awake? They're completely mentally in, going to all the meetings. How do you address this? There is, again, no right or wrong way. This kind of gets to the, talked on another video about fading versus being disfellowship versus disassociation and the outcomes of that and how everyone has to make a choice as to how they want to do that. Well, this is kind of that, but with another level. You're talking about your marriage. That's on the line too, or could be on the line, depending on the person that you're married to, or depending on you and how you feel about things. So these are just things, again, to think through. There's not one right or wrong answer. And for a lot of people, what they realize at some point when they wake up, and I'll say this even, I'll just discuss this on another video, but even for my wife and I, we got out together. When your relationship was originally founded in and on a cult, and you're awake now to the realities of that cult, you have to look at your relationship in a different light too. Is this real? Are we really in love? Or was this because we made this decision very young because a cult was around us and we shared the same cult beliefs and that person had good spiritual values, or whatever the case may be? But when you start looking at it, you're going to have to ask yourself, what is this in reality? And that's a difficult thing to do. And so only you, again, can answer that. When it comes to how you're going to approach this, again, it's just like with a cult and how there's no real good way to leave a cult. Not a real good way to address this issue in your marriage. For some people, they're going to be able to have an open conversation. Sweetie, I love you, but I have to talk to you about something because there's this big part of our lives and I just don't believe it anymore. There's the brutal truth at times that, there's a time and a place for that. And there are times to just kind of start backing away from it. Instead of actually sitting down and having a conversation with someone and saying, kind of laying your cards on the table. At times, that's an option. Another option is and especially it's difficult if you have any position in the congregation. Maybe you're a sister and you're a pioneer, you're a brother and you're an elder. You might have to start backing away from those responsibilities, which is very difficult to do because all eyes are on you. Your spouse is going to notice. And you may have to just slowly, over a long period of time, it's kind of like fading, really, kind of fading, but doing it with a partner in a marriage who is fully in. And so, this is another chance, though, where you have to kind of make your own decisions about this, and you're doing this individually. Just because the two of you are married doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, which is a kind of weird concept when you grew up married in a cult where everybody kind of believed the same thing. In a healthy relationship, you're allowed to have completely opposite belief systems and still love each other because love can overcome those things. It doesn't have to be this shallow love based on sameness. So, that's another option, to kind of slowly fade. Some people try to, again, I'm of the belief that you cannot wake your spouse up, but I do believe that most people have doubts, and you can at least soften someone up a little bit. possibly, not everyone, by maybe watching some things that cause a little bit of cognitive dissonance. In another video, I talked about watching like Leah Remini's series on Scientology, or watching some nature specials that talk about what actual evolution is, not what we were taught that evolution was, to help people see kind of how things have changed over the years, or at least to instill some doubt as to the timeline of biblical chronology, by looking at, oh look, there's some publications, here's this Sumerian society that existed back before then, and looking at relics and their ages and all these things, just things that can kind of cause some questioning internally for that person, slowly and softly, to where it might soften them, which makes your fade a little bit easier. But to those of you who are going through this, my heart goes out to you. It's really not easy. I will relate my own experience. I was able to, I don't want to say I was able to wake my wife up, but I was able to get her to admit how awake she really was. For me, it was a matter of, we had worked together for, at that point, that was probably 2014. So we had been married for about 14 years, worked together for about 14 years, pretty much every day. A lot of trust between us, as far as she knew that I wouldn't bring something up for no good reason. We had started already getting mentally healthy for a few years, reading books on depression and anxiety and narcissism. Boy, reading the books on narcissism really helps you see Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think that doing those things can be an effective strategy. Just reading kind of, it's funny how much Jehovah's Witnesses make fun of self-help. They can't say it without sarcasm. It's like self-help books, without the eye roll and the head cock and everything. But self-help books could actually be a key in this, helping people to start getting a little mentally healthier. Could help them to start seeing the toxicity of some of the stuff that they're around. That wasn't something I set out to do. I was getting healthy myself for my own reasons, because I was unhealthy. My wife kind of went down that path with me. I kind of got her to read some of the books to help understand things together. And that was a very helpful thing for us. So when it came time and I started seeing more and more things, it was a matter of, she knew she could trust me. We were both in a much healthier place. And there was a point in which we were actually driving over some railroad tracks. She remembers the story very well. And I asked her, I said, look, everybody has doubts. Every person in the congregation has doubts. And we're even told, if you read through some of the publications, it's okay to have doubts, right? If we express those doubts, it doesn't change anything, because we already have those doubts. So why don't we express those doubts, talk about those doubts? If you don't like it, take your doubts back, put them in your pocket. We don't have to talk about them again. But I wanted one shot at discussing our doubts. And we were just at a place where she was awake enough. She was waking to where, between the trust she had for me and the mentally healthy books and podcasts and different things we were being exposed to, she was just becoming a more healthy human. So she was more open. She was opening up through listening to those things and reading those things. And I think it kind of prepared her mind to be able to discuss these things, because we were discussing other higher level things as well. And then she expressed her doubts. We talked about it, and it was still a long path for us both to get out. We weren't really ready at that point. But that was a conversation that I believe is another way that you can help the situation with a spouse, is to try to just get healthier mentally and emotionally. Whether that's therapy, whether that's reading self-help books, listening to podcasts, watching things that expand your mind, that expand your horizons some, things that open you up a little bit more to possibility might be something that, again, can kind of soften that path out. But then in the end, ultimately, you're going to have to, just like all of this, decide what pain am I willing to endure? Am I willing to stick it out in this relationship that could be very toxic because of the religion itself? It could be very toxic because you're in a very toxic relationship, because many of us weren't very healthy when we got into relationships. Do you want out of that? Is that an option for you? Do you want to stick around through that and try to work on things and try to salvage it? Everybody has to make these choices. I know for myself that had my wife not woken up, the place that I was getting to, and just the person I am and how I'm wired, just like I disassociated from Jehovah's Witnesses, I would have had to leave the relationship because I just wouldn't have been able to stay in that environment. That's just me. It's the tools that I have, that I work with, and how I relate to things. Your journey may be different, to each his own. That's the beauty of not being in a cult anymore and being able to be open to possibilities and options. So I just encourage you to think through these things, and to do your best to examine the relationship you're in, the realities of it, to examine yourself, the realities of who you are and your true feelings about all of this, to really open up to yourself as well. That's something that we struggle to do when we're in a cult, is to practice self-care and really to see ourselves well. So really do a lot of introspection. Talk to a therapist, talk to a coach, talk to somebody who can help you through this path. You don't have to go it alone. Don't encourage that you do. Get involved in supportive communities, support groups, whatever. See if you can find help there as well. Maybe even just some outlets for some of your feelings to help you make it through your day. But these are all options. There's no one right or wrong way to do this. And I wish you the best. And my heart really does truly go out to anybody who's watching this video, who's in this situation, because it's just another way that Jehovah's Witnesses hurt people, and it's a shame. But you don't have to go through it forever. Life is a film strip. It's not a snapshot. This one moment in life does not define the entirety of that movie, and the movie can change. You can have a plot twist and go in another direction. But it's all up to you. And I wish you well on that journey.